On the distant planet of Viridian, deep within the galaxy, a world unlike any other existed. Lush forests, massive floating islands, and towering crystal spires made it a place of beauty and mystery. The inhabitants of Viridian, the Zelenar people, were known across the stars for their wisdom and their deep connection to an ancient force, fire. Not fire as humans knew it, but a mystical, energy-based flame that ran through their very veins, granting them strength, power, and vitality. At the heart of this world stood the grand palace of the Zelenar queen, Zahira. Her reign was unchallenged, and her wisdom was unmatched. However, despite her strength, there was one thing she could not solve: her daughter's ailment. Princess Lyra, the queen's only child, had always been the pride of her people. From a young age, she demonstrated unmatched talent, mastering the control of fire far earlier than most of her kin. Her future as the ruler of Viridian seemed set, but that was before the sickness came. It began slowly, a strange fading of her energy. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight weakness, a dimming of her inner fire. But as the days passed, her condition worsened. Lyra could no longer access the deep well of power that had once been second nature to her. She became pale and frail, her once vibrant skin losing its natural glow. The fire within her was extinguished, and with it, her vitality. No healer, no ancient ritual, no science could explain it. Queen Zahira, despite her power and her wisdom, could not find a way to restore her daughter. The loss of Lyra's fire was not just a personal tragedy, but a political one as well. Lyra was the heir to the throne. Without her strength, the throne would be left without a clear successor, and the stability of their entire empire was at risk. But the queen did not want to think about the political ramifications. She was a mother first, and her daughters, suffering, tore her apart. Then, one day, as she gazed out from the balcony of the palace, watching the suns of Viridian set across the horizon, Queen Zahira received an unexpected message. The message was from an off-worlder, a human by the name of Captain Zane. Zane was known for his bravery and skill in battle, a human warrior who had gained a reputation across the galaxy for his heroic deeds. The queen had heard rumors of this human, but what caught her attention was not his fame, but a strange and unexpected message he had sent. It read simply, "I can help." The queen's first instinct was to dismiss it. How could a human, a being so far removed from her own people, possibly help? But desperation clouded her judgment, and she decided to meet this human. If there was even a slight chance that he could heal Lyra, she would take it. The next day, Captain Zane arrived on Viridian. His ship, a sleek silver vessel, touched down in the royal landing bay, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Zane stepped out, a tall man with broad shoulders, his eyes sharp and focused. He looked like someone who had seen countless battles, and yet there was a calmness about him as he walked toward the queen's palace. When he entered the grand hall of the palace, he was greeted by the queen herself, a woman who seemed as formidable as the planet she ruled. Zahira's beauty was timeless, but her eyes betrayed the weight of her sorrow. She studied Zane carefully, wondering how a man like him could possibly help her daughter. "I've heard much about you, Captain Zane," she said, her voice regal, but filled with hidden pain. "But tell me, how could a human help my daughter?" Zane bowed his head in respect. "Your Majesty, I've faced many challenges in my life, some that seemed impossible to overcome. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I believe that where there is a will, there is a way." Zahira's gaze softened slightly, but she still remained skeptical. "My daughter has a sickness that no one has been able to cure. I've searched the stars for answers, and yet nothing has worked. Why should I believe that you can help?" Zane stepped closer, his voice steady but with a hint of empathy. I don't know what caused your daughter's condition, but I do know that I've encountered things beyond what science or medicine can explain. Perhaps your daughter's fire needs something more than medicine. Maybe it needs a spark, something to reignite it from within. The Queen studied him closely. A spark? Zane nodded. Sometimes, the greatest power lies within us. It just needs the right moment to awaken. I can help her find that moment. Zahira looked at him, her heart torn. The desperation she had been carrying for so long made her consider the possibility, however improbable. But what else could she do? She had no other choice. Her daughter was fading away, and she could not bear to lose her. I will give you one chance, the Queen said. If you fail, I will not hold it against you. But if you succeed... Zane's eyes hardened with determination. I won't fail, Your Majesty. The Queen's voice softened. You must understand, Captain. My daughter is more than just a princess. She is the future of Viridian. If you fail her, it could mean the end of everything. Zane nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He was not just fighting for a life, he was fighting for a people, for an entire planet's future. He could not afford to fail. Later that day, Zane was led to Lyra's chambers. As he entered, he saw her lying on a large bed, her skin pale, and her eyes distant. She looked like a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. The fire that had once burned so brightly within her was gone. Lyra turned her head to look at him as he approached. She did not rise, nor did she speak, but there was a faint spark of recognition in her eyes. She was beautiful, but the sickness had drained her, leaving her with little more than a quiet sadness. "You're Captain Zane, I presume?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane smiled gently, trying to ease the tension in the room. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm here to help." Lyra looked at him with a mix of skepticism and hope. "How could you possibly help me?" "No one has been able to. I've seen so many healers, so many shamans, but nothing works. My fire is gone." Zane sat at the edge of her bed, his expression kind but firm. Sometimes, our greatest strength lies within us, waiting for the right moment, to be awakened. I believe that moment is now. Lyra looked at him, a faint spark of hope beginning to flicker in her eyes. "And if you can't do it? What then?" Zane looked at her directly, his voice steady. "Then we'll keep trying. But I believe in you, Princess, Lyra. I believe in your fire." For the first time in months, Lyra allowed herself to believe in something again. There was a spark within her, a small, fragile thing, but it was there. And perhaps, just perhaps, this human might be the one to fan it back to life. As the night fell over Viridian, Zane prepared for the long journey ahead. He did not know what awaited him or how he would succeed, but one thing was clear. This was more than just a request from a queen. It was a chance to save a life, and perhaps to change the fate of an entire world. The early morning sun rose over the vast plains of Viridian, casting a soft, golden hue over the land. Captain Zane stood at the edge of the royal palace, looking out at the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of the ancient forest that stretched out before him, an expanse of green that seemed endless. There was a calmness to the planet that Zane had never experienced in his travels, but there was also an undercurrent of urgency. He was on a mission, one that could change the future of an entire world. Princess Lyra's condition was worsening by the day. The once powerful alien princess, whose fire had fueled the very core of her people's strength, now lay weak, unable to harness her inner power. Her fire was gone, and with it, her vitality. The Queen had placed her trust in Zane, despite the fact that he was an outsider, one who knew nothing of their mystical energy, nothing of the secrets that ran through their veins. Zane wasn't a healer. He wasn't a mystic. He was a soldier, trained for battle, for survival, not for curing diseases or awakening the powers of alien races. But the Queen's desperation had touched him. Lyra's eyes, filled with sorrow and hope, had made him realize something. There was more at stake, here than just a sick princess. If he could somehow help her, he might not just save her life, but change the fate of Viridian itself. He turned away from the balcony and made his way toward the grand hall, where Lyra waited. As he approached, he felt a mix of emotions: nervousness, uncertainty, and a strange sense of determination. He had no idea how to heal her, but he knew one thing: he had to try. When Zane entered Lyra's chambers, he found her sitting up in bed, her once glowing skin now pale and lifeless. Her golden eyes, the eyes that had once burned with an unyielding fire, now seemed distant and clouded. She looked fragile, like a delicate flower on the verge of withering. Zane walked toward her slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence of the room. Lyra turned her head to look at him, her gaze heavy with a mix of skepticism and hope. "You came," she said, her voice weak but clear. "I wasn't sure if you would." Zane smiled gently, trying to ease the tension in the room. "I'm here, Your Highness. I promised I would help." She gave him a small, tired smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wish I could believe that," she whispered. "But nothing has worked. No one can help me." Zane sat at the edge of her bed, his eyes soft but filled with determination. "I know it's hard to believe, Princess, but I believe there's more to your fire than just this illness. There's something inside you that can be awakened. Something that hasn't gone away." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane leaned forward slightly, speaking with the conviction he had learned over years of battle. "I think your fire hasn't been extinguished. It's just been buried deep inside you. You've lost touch with it, but it's still there. We just need to find it again." The princess's gaze softened slightly, but the doubt in her eyes remained. "I don't know how you think you can help. My fire was never just a part of me. It was my power, my strength. Without it, I feel lost." Zane's expression was steady as he spoke. "I've seen things in my life, things that defy reason, things that no one thought possible. I don't have all the answers, but I know this: you're not lost. You just need to reconnect with what's inside you, and I'll help you find it." Lyra was silent for a moment, looking away as if lost in thought. She had heard similar words from many others before, but none of them had given her hope. None of them had helped her find the strength she once had. Still, something in Zane's voice made her wonder. Could he be different? "All right," she said. Finally, her voice tinged with resignation. "I'll give it a try. But if it doesn't work, don't blame yourself." Zane nodded, his expression serious. "We'll make it work, Princess. I promise." The journey to the sacred temple was long and treacherous. Located deep within the heart of Viridian's ancient forest, the temple was said to be a place of great power, a place where the fire of the Zelenar people had been first discovered. It was a place where the energy that ran through their veins had been harnessed, where their greatest leaders had gone to seek enlightenment and strength. It was also a place filled with danger, hidden trials, and ancient secrets. As Zane and Lyra traveled through the dense forest, the air grew thick with the scent of moss and the distant calls of strange, unseen creatures. The forest was alive with energy, and it seemed as though the very earth beneath their feet was pulsing with an ancient rhythm. It was a world far removed from the human cities Zane had known, and yet there was something familiar about it, a sense of deep connection, as if everything in the forest was tied together by an invisible thread. Zane and Lyra moved through the forest, making their way toward the temple. The journey was difficult. and the terrain was unforgiving. The ground was uneven, and the thick canopy of trees blocked out most of the sunlight, casting the path in shadows. But they pressed on, determined to reach their destination. As they traveled, Zane couldn't help but notice the change in Lyra. At first, she had been quiet and distant, her body weak and her mind consumed by her illness. But now, as they walked through the forest, something seemed to stir within her. She walked with more purpose, her steps more confident, as if the very energy of the forest was beginning to awaken something deep inside her. "Do you feel that?" Zane asked, pausing to look at her. Lyra nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "Yes," she said softly. "It's like the forest is alive, like it's calling to me." Zane smiled. "It's the energy of the land. The temple is said to be a place where that energy is most powerful. Maybe it's starting to wake up inside you." Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time in weeks, a spark of hope began to flicker in her eyes. Could it be? Could this human, this outsider, actually be helping her find her fire again? They continued on, and as the hours passed, the forest began to change. The air grew thicker, more charged with energy, and the sounds of the forest grew louder, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets to one another. They were getting closer. By the time they reached the edge of the temple's ancient stone steps, night had fallen. The temple loomed before them, a massive structure carved into the side of a mountain. It was ancient, covered in ivy and moss, and yet it radiated a sense of power. The air was heavy with history, and Zane could feel the weight of the trials that awaited them. Lyra stopped at the foot of the stairs, looking up at the towering structure. "This is where it all began," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. Zane stood beside her, looking at the temple with a mix of curiosity and determination. "This is where we'll find the answers." Together they ascended the steps, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them inside. As they entered the temple, the air seemed to hum with energy, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm. This was a place of great power, a place where the fire of the Zelenar people had first been ignited. And it was here that Lyra would either awaken her fire once more or lose it forever. The temple's entrance loomed before them, a massive archway of ancient stone, weathered by time but still standing tall. The air was thick with the scent of aged moss and the faint hum of unseen energies. Zane and Lyra stood at the foot of the entrance, feeling both the weight of history and the intense power that seemed to pulse through the very walls of the temple. It was clear that this was no ordinary place. It was a sanctuary, a site where the ancient fire had first been tamed and understood by the Zelenar people. Lyra stood still for a moment, her golden eyes scanning the towering structure. Despite the power of the place, she couldn't shake the doubts that had clouded her mind for so long. Would this really work? Could she truly find the fire that had been lost to her? Zane's voice broke the silence, steady and reassuring. "We're here now, Princess. We've come this far. We just need to trust ourselves and this place." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I want to believe that. I really do." With one final glance toward the vast expanse of the temple, they stepped inside. The interior of the temple was dim, illuminated only by the faint glow of ancient crystals embedded in the walls. Their light was soft, almost otherworldly, casting long shadows and making the stone beneath their feet seem alive. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into a dark void, and the walls were lined with intricate carvings, scenes of Zelenar ancestors, their powerful forms surrounded by swirling energy, their hands outstretched as if calling upon the fire itself. As they moved deeper into the temple, the temperature seemed to rise, and the air grew thick with energy. Lyra could feel it now, an invisible force that stirred inside her, though it was faint. The fire was still there, buried deep, but it was distant, like a forgotten memory. Zane turned to her, sensing her unease. "How do you feel?" Lyra closed, her eyes trying to tune into the energy around her. "I can feel it," she said quietly. "It's like it's just out of reach." Zane gave her a small smile. "That's a good sign. It means it's still there. You just have to find a way to reach it." They continued through the temple, passing through archways and narrow passages, until they reached a large chamber at the heart of the structure. The room was vast, its walls covered in ancient runes and symbols, and in the center stood a massive stone platform raised above the ground. Atop the platform was a large crystal, glowing with an intense light that seemed to pulse with energy. The moment they entered the chamber, Lyra felt a shift. The fire inside her stirred, just a little, but it was enough to make her pause. She had never felt anything like this before. This temple, this place, was the source of her people's power, and it was calling to her. Zane looked at her, his voice low. "This is it. This is where it all begins." Lyra stepped forward, her gaze locked on the glowing crystal. The energy from it was undeniable, and she could feel it pulling at her, urging her to come closer. But the closer she got, the more intense the sensation became. It was as if the very fire of her people was contained within that crystal, waiting to be released. She hesitated, her mind racing. Could she do it? Could she tap into that energy and awaken her fire once more? She had tried so many times before, and each time the power had eluded her. But Zane was there, watching her, waiting for her to make the first move. His belief in her was unwavering, and that belief gave her strength. She couldn't give up now, not when she had come this far. Taking a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward and placed her hands gently on the crystal. The moment she touched it, a shock of energy coursed through her and she gasped, almost losing her balance. The fire inside her, the fire that had been dormant for so long, roared to life. It was a small flame at first, flickering weakly, but then it began to grow. The energy surged through her, filling her veins, her very soul with a heat and power she had forgotten. But the fire was different this time. At first it was exhilarating, a rush of energy that seemed to cleanse her of all her doubts and fears. She could feel her strength returning, her senses sharpening, and the weight of her illness lifting. But then, just as quickly, the fire began to intensify, growing hotter and fiercer. It was as though the flame inside her was no longer under her control. The very energy that had once been her ally now felt like a wild beast, threatening to consume her. Zane stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Lyra, control it! You have to control the fire!" Lyra's heart raced as she struggled to keep her composure. The fire was wild, untamed, and it threatened to burn her from the inside out. She could feel it pushing against her, trying to break free, but she couldn't let it. She couldn't let it destroy everything she had worked so hard for. I can't, she cried, panic rising in her chest. Zane was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "Yes, you can. You've always had the power. You just need to trust yourself." "Focus, Lyra!" She closed her eyes, taking deep, steadying breaths. She had always been able to control the fire, to bend it to her will. But somewhere along the way, she had lost that control. And now, in the heart of the temple, it was as if everything was coming to a head. The fire was a part of her, and she was a part of it. She just needed to remember that. Slowly, carefully, Lyra focused. She could feel the heat inside her, the raw power that was threatening to overwhelm her. But she also felt something else, something that had always been there, deep within her. The fire was not her enemy. It was her strength. With that thought, Lyra centered herself, allowing the fire to flow through her, but not to consume her. She focused on the feeling of the energy, guiding it, shaping it into something she could control. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediate, but little by little, the flame within her settled. Zane watched, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of awe and concern. He could see the effort it took, the battle she was waging within herself. But he also saw something else, a quiet strength that had been there all along, buried beneath the fear and the doubt. After what felt like an eternity, Lyra opened her eyes, and the fire within her had changed. It was still there, vibrant and alive, but now it was calm, controlled. She could feel it humming within her, a steady, powerful force that no longer threatened to destroy her. Zane let out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. "You did it!" Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with astonishment. "I did. I feel it. I can feel the fire again." For the first time in what felt like forever, a genuine smile crossed her face. The fire that had been taken from her, the power that had once been her birthright, was hers again. And this time, she knew how to control it. Zane smiled back at her. "You've always had it in you. You just needed to remember." The crystal in the center of the chamber continued to glow, its light pulsing softly in the background, as if acknowledging the success of the trial. Lyra stood tall now, her posture more confident, her strength restored. She had done it. She had reclaimed her fire. But as she looked at the glowing crystal, a sense of quiet unease settled over her. The temple had given her back what was lost, but there was still something about this place that felt ancient, mysterious, almost as if the temple itself was watching them. Zane seemed to sense her hesitation. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. "I don't know," she admitted. "It feels like there's something more here, something hidden." Zane's expression grew serious. "Then we need to be careful. We don't know what other trials this place might hold." Lyra nodded, her hand still resting on the crystal. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Together, they stood in the heart of the temple, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had awakened the fire, but the journey was far from over. Ask ChatGPT. The air in the temple seemed heavier now, as if it too had recognized the change that had occurred within Lyra. She stood still, the fire within her burning bright and steady, yet a lingering unease tugged at her. The overwhelming energy that had once threatened to consume her was now balanced, under her control. But even with her newfound strength, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Zane stood beside her, watching her closely. His expression was calm, but there was a look of quiet concern in his eyes. He had seen many things in his life, things that defied logic and reason, but seeing Lyra so changed, so full of power, made him realize just how dangerous that power could be. It was both a gift and a burden, and the burden was only beginning. "Are you all right?" Zane asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Lyra turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. She could feel the fire inside her, that familiar warmth now coursing through her veins. But it wasn't just warmth anymore. There was a new sharpness to it, a burning intensity that hadn't been there before. It was as though the fire had grown, becoming something more than just a tool for power. It was becoming a part of her, entwining with her very soul. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I can feel it, Zane. I can feel the fire again, but it's different this time. Stronger. More dangerous." Zane's brow furrowed. "Dangerous?" Lyra nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes. It's like it has a mind of its own, It's hard to control, even though I've learned how to manage it. Zane stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You'll figure it out, Lyra. You've already done the hardest part. You've taken control. You just need to trust yourself. She nodded, but deep down, she was not so sure. The fire was no longer just an extension of her. It felt as though it was part of her in a way she couldn't explain. And with that power came a sense of fear. A fear of losing herself to it, of becoming something she wasn't. The two of them remained in the heart of the temple for a while longer, allowing Lyra to adjust to her new strength. It was clear that her fire had returned, but Zane knew they couldn't stay in the temple forever. The real world awaited them, and there were still many challenges ahead. They began their journey back toward the palace, the path through the dense forest stretching out before them. The air was still thick with the energy of the temple, and Lyra could feel it in her every step. The fire inside her surged, as if reacting to the world around her, and though she had learned to control it, there were moments when it threatened to flare out of control. As they traveled, Zane kept a close eye on her. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her hands would occasionally twitch as if itching to unleash the power within her. It was clear that the fire was still a struggle for her to manage, but he also saw something else, something that gave him hope. When they reached the edge of the forest and the palace came into view, Lyra stopped. Her heart began to race, her chest tightening as she looked at the familiar structure. She had been away from it for so long, and now that she was returning, she wasn't sure how she would be received. "What's wrong?" Zane asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "I don't know," Lyra admitted, her voice low. "It's just, everything feels different now. I'm different." Zane understood. She wasn't just the princess who had once been full of potential. She was now someone with incredible power. Power that had the potential to change everything, for better or worse. And with that power came a responsibility, one that Lyra hadn't fully understood until now. They continued toward the palace, and as they crossed the threshold of the royal grounds, they were met by Queen Zahira herself. The queen's gaze swept over Lyra, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of her daughter. There was a moment of silence as the two women locked eyes, and then the queen stepped forward, her voice filled with awe and concern. "You've done it," Queen Zahira said softly. "You've regained your fire." Lyra nodded, though she could feel the weight of her mother's words. "I have," she said, her voice steady but heavy with uncertainty. "But it's not the same fire I had before. It's stronger, more dangerous, and I'm afraid I might lose control of it." Queen Zahira's expression softened, though there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. "You are the heir to the throne, Lyra. Your fire is your strength, but it is also your greatest responsibility. The power you possess is not to be taken lightly. It can change everything." Lyra lowered her gaze. "I know. I'm not sure if I can handle it." Zane, standing quietly beside them, stepped forward. "She'll figure it out, Your Majesty. Lyra's strong. She's learned to control it already. It's just a matter of time." The queen studied him for a moment before nodding. "I hope you're right, Captain. But the truth is, we don't know the full extent of what Lyra's fire can do. It's one thing to regain it, but another to use it wisely." Lyra met her mother's gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's words. "I understand, Mother. I'll do my best to control it." Over the next few days, Lyra spent much of her time in solitude, trying to understand the fire within her and how to control it. She knew that her mother had been right. Her fire was more powerful than it had ever been before. But with that power came a new sense of fear. She didn't know what would happen if she lost control of it again. The last thing she wanted was to become a danger to those she loved. Zane remained by her side, offering support and encouragement. He had seen how hard Lyra was trying, how much she wanted to master her fire, and he knew that it wasn't going to be easy. But he also knew that she had the strength to do it. She just needed time. On the third day after their return, Queen Zahira called a council meeting. The royal palace was filled with advisors, generals, and political figures, all of them eager to hear what the queen had to say about her daughter's miraculous recovery. Lyra stood beside her mother, her posture straight but her heart racing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, for the weight of the throne to be thrust upon her, but she knew that this moment would shape her future. When the queen spoke, her voice rang out with authority. "Today, we stand on the precipice of a new era. My daughter, Princess Lyra, has regained her fire, and with it, the strength to lead our people. She is the future of Viridian." Lyra felt a wave of pressure wash over her as the room fell silent. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her to speak, to confirm what the queen had said. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. She could feel the fire inside her, its heat building, but she focused, keeping it contained. "I may have regained my fire," she began, her voice steady. "But I know that it is not something to be taken lightly. This power, this fire, is not just a gift. It is a responsibility. I will do my best to use it wisely, for the good of Viridian and for all of its people." The room was silent for a moment before the advisors and generals nodded, their expressions a mix of respect and cautious optimism. They had seen Lyra's potential, but now they were seeing something else: maturity. She was no longer just the young princess. They were seeing the future ruler of Viridian. But even as she spoke those words, Lyra knew that the true challenge was only beginning. She had regained her fire, but she had also gained something else: the weight of responsibility. And with that responsibility came a question she wasn't sure she could answer. Was she ready to wield the power that was now hers, or would the fire consume her in the end? As the council meeting ended and the room began to empty, Lyra stood by her mother's side, still processing everything that had just happened. The future of Viridian was in her hands, and it was up to her to decide how to wield the power she had regained. It was a heavy burden, but it was one she had to carry, whether she was ready for it or not. Ask ChatGPT. The grand hall of the palace felt quieter than usual. The walls, adorned with the symbols of the Zelenar people, seemed to pulse with a gentle hum of energy, as if the very stone of the building was aware of the changes that had come to Viridian. The echoes of Lyra's declaration still rang in the minds of those who had been present at the council meeting. She had spoken with strength and conviction, but behind those words there was a quiet uncertainty, a fear that she had yet to fully face. Lyra stood by the large window, looking out over the vast landscape of Viridian. The land stretched before her in rolling green hills, dotted with crystal-clear lakes and forests that seemed to go on forever. But her eyes were not focused on the beauty of her world. Instead, her thoughts were elsewhere, consumed with the weight of what lay ahead. She could feel the fire inside her, burning bright and steady, but with it came a new sense of responsibility that was heavier than any burden she had ever known. Her hand rested lightly on the stone windowsill, the warmth of the fire within her, almost tangible. It was no longer just a part of her, it was her. It was a power that ran through her veins, a constant presence that she could no longer ignore. The question that lingered in her mind was not how to control it, but how to ensure it didn't control her. Zane, who had been by her side since the day they had arrived back at the palace, walked quietly into the room. He had given her space. These past few days, knowing that she needed time to come to terms with the changes that had taken place within her. But now, as the weight of the throne loomed over her, he couldn't stay silent any longer. "You're quiet," Zane said gently, his voice breaking the stillness of the room. "What's on your mind?" Lyra turned to face him, her golden eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I thought I knew what I wanted, to be the ruler my people needed. But now that I have this power, I'm not sure how to use it. I don't want to become someone who is consumed by it, Zane." Zane stepped closer, his eyes soft with understanding. "You won't. You're stronger than that, Lyra. You've already proven that. The fire inside you doesn't define you. It's just a part of who you are. What makes you strong is your heart, your determination, and your willingness to do what's best for your people." Lyra smiled faintly, but the uncertainty still lingered. "I wish I could be as certain as you are. The fire feels like it's becoming a part of me, more than just a tool I can control. Sometimes it feels like it's taking over." Zane's expression grew serious. "It's normal to feel that way. Power, especially this kind of power, can be overwhelming. But you're not alone in this, Lyra. You've already shown that you can control it. You just have to keep believing in yourself." Lyra nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. "I've spent so much of my life waiting for this moment, the moment when I would be ready to take the throne. Now that it's here, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether I'm ready to jump." Zane placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one is ever truly ready for what comes next. But that doesn't mean you're not capable. You have the strength to face whatever comes your way. You've already proven that." There was a long pause as Lyra took in his words. She had always been so sure of her path, so certain of her destiny. But now, with the fire inside her, her journey felt like something entirely new. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was the future ruler of Viridian, and that meant making decisions that would affect the lives of her people for generations to come. The weight of that responsibility was not one she had fully understood until now. The following days were filled with preparations. The palace was buzzing with activity as the news of Lyra's return spread throughout Viridian. Her power had been restored, and with it, the hopes of the people. There was a sense of excitement in the air, but also a quiet unease, as everyone wondered how Lyra would handle the challenges of ruling. As the new ruler, Lyra was expected to address the people, to make her presence known, and to prove that she was capable of leading the empire. But as the day of her speech approached, the pressure grew heavier. She had spoken in front of the council, but speaking to the people of Viridian was a different matter entirely. She could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on her, and the fire inside her, though steady, seemed to grow hotter with each passing moment. Zane stood by her side, offering his quiet support, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands fidgeted when she thought no one was looking. He knew she was struggling, but he also knew that this was the moment that would define her future. "Are you ready?" Zane asked one morning as they prepared for the speech. Lyra hesitated, her gaze drifting to the courtyard below, where the people of Viridian were already gathering. "I don't know if I can ever be ready," she admitted. "But I have to do this. For them. For my people." Zane nodded. "You're stronger than you think. You'll find your way." The day of the speech arrived, and the grand square of the palace was filled with the people of Viridian. The air was thick with anticipation, and the crowd buzzed with quiet whispers. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the return of their princess, the heir to the throne who had been lost to them for so long. Lyra stood at the balcony, looking out over the sea of faces below. The fire inside her stirred, the energy within her thrumming with life. She could feel the people's eyes on her, their hopes and dreams resting on her shoulders. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was their future. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice steady as she began to speak. "My people," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I stand before you today not as a princess, but as your ruler. The fire that once burned within me has returned, and with it, my strength. But this fire is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word she spoke. Lyra felt the fire inside her burn brighter as she spoke, her confidence growing with each sentence. "I have learned much in my time away, and I have come to understand that true strength is not found in power alone. It is found in unity, in the bond we share as a people. Together we will rebuild our world, not just with strength, but with wisdom and compassion." Her words resonated through the crowd, and for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone in this. The people of Viridian were with her, and together they would face whatever challenges came their way. As the speech came to an end, the crowd erupted in applause. Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest, but now it wasn't out of fear. It was out of a deep sense of purpose. She had taken the first step toward her future, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to lead. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the palace had quieted, Lyra stood once again, by the window gazing out at the stars. Zane had returned to his quarters for the night, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was different now. The fire within her was no longer just a tool or a weapon. It was a part of her destiny. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if acknowledging the changes that had taken place. Lyra had reclaimed her fire, but more than that, she had reclaimed herself. The future of Viridian was now in her hands, and she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. With the fire burning bright within her, Lyra knew that she had taken the first step toward becoming the ruler she had always been meant to be. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer afraid. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt the strength of her own fire, and she was ready to wield it not just for herself, but for all of Viridian.